Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, where today we're walking through Chapter 10 of The Impersonal Life by Joseph Benner. We're still in the Garden of Eden. We're comparing it to Chapter 10 of the Book of John, fourth book of the New Testament. We're mixing in the Elvis perspective, and we're also taking very short looks at The Prophet, another book that Elvis loved, on pages that Elvis underlined and he wrote notations. And we're doing all that when we come back from this song, which is Glass Slippers You Left Behind.
I was sitting by your side in Lisa's room with your hand in mine when you whispered of December in a church you'd already seen. You spoke of rosebuds on my dress, gold sparks shining when I turned, and I felt like a storybook princess in a world I'd finally earned. You said you'd tell the world in Memphis, 2 weeks and you'd say my name. Talk to children in the quiet like a candle's gentle flame. But the morning stole you from me like a breath that slipped away, and the plans we made together all dissolved in a single day. Oh love, I'm walking through the shadows with the glass slippers you left behind. I'll reach for you in the silence, but only memory answers mine. A part of me went with you where the spirit and the body meet, and I'm learning how to live again with one heart broken, one still beating at your feet. You said life and death were woven, 2 threads in the same design, but I shook as I knelt beside you, calling your name like it still was mine. Lisa cried and ran from the doorway, her world falling like shattered glass, and I held the ache inside me as the moment turned and passed. You always said that love was light, a spark God placed in every soul. Now I search for it in the darkness, trying to trust what I can't control. If distance closes in the ending, then maybe you're not far at all. Maybe you're just in the quiet where the spirit hears the call. Oh love, I'm walking through the shadows with the glass slippers you left behind. I reach for you in the silence, but only memory answers mine. A part of me went with you where the spirit and the body meet, and I'm learning how to live again with one heart broken, one still beating at your feet. I'll keep the dreams you gave me, no one can take them away, and I'll carry your light inside me till we meet again someday. For love is stronger than sorrow, and faith is stronger than fear, and I feel you still beside me, soft as a whisper in my ear.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And let the first echo that we hear today be from Joseph Benner out of The Impersonal Life. And so, during the latter ages, you have been, as it were, gradually throwing off layer after layer of human consciousness, dissipating the mist or glamour thrown around your mind by the intellect, subduing, controlling, spiritualizing, and thus clarifying the intellect itself until now you are beginning to awaken and to see through the ever thinning remaining layers occasional glimpses of me, the one great reality within all things. Here in chapter 10, Joseph Benner has been telling us about the Garden of Eden, which is not a place where Adam and Eve began life. It is. But it's also a state that each of us goes through. There's a period of time when we have a direct connection to the I Am, or the God who lives in our heart, Jesus, our direct line of communication with the divine, that it's unfettered. There's no interference in the way. We are aligned. And at some point, we form a personality, which is like a mask that we put on. Only the personality is multiple masks. It's layer after layer after layer of masks. And we need these masks in order to properly express the divine attribute that we were sent here to, what Joseph Benner describes as the real earth, a project that's in play right now. We're in the middle of the project, like being in the middle of a cake that isn't quite baked. And we've got something that we've got to do to finish the project. We're an integral part of it. That requires the personality. The chapter's been telling us that we needed to know how to use that personality, the same way that a carpenter needs to know how to use a hammer. If you haven't actually used a hammer, or you've used it very slightly, it's very difficult to drive those nails through the wood. But a seasoned carpenter, a man who knows how to swing the hammer, a man who the hammer is part of him, he imbues the hammer with part of himself. It becomes an extension of the carpenter. That's the way that we need to be able to use the mask, to be able to use the personality. We have to inhabit it in that way in order to be able to express the divine attribute that is our purpose. And that means we had to get so deep into this role that we forgot that we're part of unity. Like a baby bird that has been pushed out of the nest by the mother. The mother did not push the bird out as a punishment. It's because there comes a time when the bird has to leave the nest and he flies away. And he understands he can fly and he revels in it. It's an amazing ability. And he gets lost in his ability to fly. And then one moment he wakes up and says, "Oh, hey, I came from this nest. I'm not sure I remember my way back." And that's exactly what's happened with the divine shard that is each of us, wrapped in a soul body, which is perfect. And then we have this mortal body, which reflects the soul body. And our mortal body is imperfect because it is here on the mortal realm. These are the ideas that Joseph Benner has been spiraling around. And in this paragraph, he's telling us that as we grew into the maturity of our personality, that we were then able to gradually throw off layer after layer, because those layers were creating an interference with our ability to align. And for Joseph Benner, it's all about alignment. So alignment means that you are pointed or facing towards God. Not even necessarily that you're walking towards him. It's the first step in everything. You have to be able to look at God. and then everything else follows. You're able to receive the love that God is because you're facing Him. You're able to transmit that love onto others. You're able to manifest it into creation. And something about that creation is the divine attribute that you need to express. And so this paragraph's telling us about how we get rid of that interference, the technical aspects of it. Again, Joseph Benner, the entire book reads somewhat like stereo instructions. Here's how you do this in order to reach this next step. You plug the stereo speaker into the stereo. You plug the stereo into the electric socket. You push the button for the stereo to come on. That's the way that Benner's wording kind of reads. He's also very long-winded about it, which makes it also have that stereo instructional feel. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Beetlejuice, but in the movie Beetlejuice, the main characters, they find a handbook for the afterlife, and they attempt to read it, and it's so boring because of the way that it's written. It has all the knowledge they need. They just can't bring themselves to read enough of it to really learn the rules about the afterlife because it's just too boring. That's a little bit, I think, of what Joseph Benner is like, especially to those that Elvis may have gifted this book to. If they weren't searching themselves, then I'm not sure this is the kind of book they would sit down and read. Definitely they would have read his annotation. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And then the paragraph says, until now, you are beginning to awaken and to see through ever thinning remaining layers. So this is very interesting too, is that we have interference with the I am, and Joseph is comparing it to mist or fog, and that there's different clarity within the fog. And I think we've all experienced that if you've ever driven through mist or through fog. And so you don't have to remove all of the interference, just enough to see where God is, to see what direction that you need to go. Where is the light coming from? And that once you're attuned to the light, you'll be able to burn away more of the fog. So this is, again, another instruction. When you are lost, reorient towards the light. It's about alignment. And that through that thinning fog, you get the occasional glimpses of me, the one great reality. That's another expression of unity. Me is the I am in your heart, God. He's the one great reality. He is unity. You could also replace those words with love. As the layers of the fog thin, you're able to discern love. You're able to feel the love that God is always sending, even when your fog hides it from yourself. The fog isn't something God has sent to you, it's something that you've layered about yourself. And only you can remove it. That's also implicit within this paragraph. And then it says, but all this time, you, the omniscient, impersonal I am of you. That is a very long-winded way of saying the divine shard or your soul, the piece of you which is God. Although I guess I'm just as long-winded as Benner now. The divine shard is a term that I use to wrap up what Benner means by you, the omniscient, impersonal I am of you. You are a piece of the divine. Each of us has a piece of God inside. Hi, Lorna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And I think this is very important to Elvis's worldview. He saw each person as a divine shard. Now, I don't think Elvis would have used the term divine shard, because I've made that up as we've gone through this. But I think he would have resonated with it. He would have responded to it. He would have appreciated it, because that is the way that he saw others. He wasn't dividing people by what they currently believe or by what the faith that they had illuminated. Because the faith is like a lantern and it's illuminating paths. But as we've seen with the sheepfold in the book of John, there's a narrow entryway into the sheepfold, but there's not a narrow path to it. All paths can lead to the sheepfold. It has an infinite number of ways to reach it. It's just that once you get there, you have to go in by that door. And I think that's what Elvis saw. He saw the divine shard in everyone. And he saw that because there were so many different kinds of people in his life and in his audience, that when he was on stage and singing, everyone was sending back this love that he was sending forth. All of the divine shards were speaking to each other in those moments. And that's where his compassion for all the other divine shards comes from, that he's trying to reach them all. And Joseph Benner is giving him a metaphysical view to do that. Joseph Benner is saying that the compassion that you feel for these others, it's true and right, and it's in the Bible, and I'm trying to show you where it's at. And that others have shown you that same book, but they didn't see this part of it. And so they have their ideas of what it is, and I don't think Benner's coming out and saying they're wrong. He's saying there's more, that there's more than they see. And that's what opens up the circle of salvation to more than what each particular sect of Christianity at Elvis's time period was willing to accept. But here it says, but all this time, you, the omniscient, impersonal I am of you, were consciously and intentionally doing all this, not for the purpose of getting the mere knowledge of earth conditions and things, as your intellect has so loudly and authoritatively proclaimed. So this is interesting because it's almost a statement about science, that you've been learning everything there is to know about Earth and the world that you live in, and we would call that science in today's age. And that your intellect is loudly and authoritatively proclaiming, that's why we're doing it, for intellect, which is another way to say for science. But it's not just science. This would branch out into everything, basically, even into art, into all forms of human expression. It just resonates about science with me today, because we live in 2026 and we are very interested in science. But it was also becoming very popular at Joseph Benner's time. And it was kind of directly challenging religion in that time. We've grown to a point where they're coexisting easier, I think, next to each other. But in Joseph Benner's time, science and religion, they were clashing head on. And Elizabeth is asking, am I saying that we each have a piece of God inside us? Yes, that's definitely what Benner is saying. And I think that's what Elvis believed, and I think that's reflected in the Bible. And we've often called it a soul. But Benner is pointing out that it's a divine shard, even though he doesn't use that term. He talks about pieces of the divine or the fact that you have this omniscient, impersonal I am of you. The word impersonal, which is also in the title of the book, means the opposite of personality. So we might look at that word impersonal and think, oh, that's kind of rotten. Because I go to a restaurant, I want personal attention. If I'm in a hotel, I want personal service. Anything I do, I want it to be personalized for me. Streaming content on Netflix is all about personalization. It's another form of individuality. Another way to say that. It's all about the individual. The impersonal is unity. When we are all together in unity consciously, there will be no personalities because those are left behind. They're masks, they're tools that we use on the earthly plane. We'll leave them behind. We will be fully integrated back into unity, and we will have no personalities. But that's not bad. We kind of think of it as bad because we really like to be an individual. And that's what else Benner's pointing out. You like it. Of course you do. It's beautiful. It's good. It's supposed to be that way. But it's also an interference with hearing the I am. It creates a fog. And the thickness of that fog is up to you. It might be thick. It might be thin. You want to try to keep it thin or get into the sheepfold, which is a place of relative safety with others, where you're protected by the shepherd and you have the ability to take off the mask and communicate directly with God. This would be meditation, prayer. Also other things like the zone, where you're able to create and you kind of forget about whatever is going on around you. You lose yourself in the moment. It's also your family. It's also the circle of your friends. These are all echoes of unity. But Benner is saying that we all are unity, and that unity is accessible from inside us when we be still and know I am God. When you quiet the mind, but you also stop the struggle. Benner spirals around ideas, and some of the ideas are very uncomfortable. And depending on where you stop on the spiral to view the idea, it may be very, very uncomfortable. And that's a signpost that this idea is going to take more spiraling. And so Benner's way to get past that is just continue to move around the spiral. You'll see the same idea from different angles. And one of those ideas is unity. And no matter where you look, you will see unity. And at first, you kind of push against it because we are each an individual. But as you keep moving around the spiral, you'll see there's more and more similarities in unity. And this passage says that we've been doing this not for the purpose of getting the mere knowledge of earth or the conditions of earth. This is kind of the science piece. As your intellect has so loudly and authoritatively proclaimed, it's for science, it's for our mind, it's for our intellect. But that's not what it's for. Joseph Benner says the purpose, in order that you might harvest what you have sown in the dim ages past. That there has been no wasted time, is what this is saying. All of these experiences are stacked together like building blocks of your spiritual growth, of your, maybe it's more like your materialistic growth here, that gets you to a point where you can restart the spiritual journey back towards God. Like the baby bird, you have to reach the point where you remember there is a nest. And here it says, but in order that you might harvest what you have sown in the dim ages past, it could manifest forth my perfect idea on earth, even as you are now manifesting it in the impersonal estate, your heavenly home. Let's look at this again. So he wants us to take what we've learned and with our newfound perspective that was brought to us through alignment, now that we are aligned and we consciously wish to use our free will to serve God, to move forward with the plan. What's the plan? The plan is my perfect idea on earth. Joseph has earlier referred to this as the real earth. Hi, Deborah. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And it says, even as you are now manifesting it in the impersonal estate, your heavenly home. So part of us, this divine shard, still lives in unity. It's hard to wrap our heads around, but we're actually manifesting our portion of unity at all times in this impersonal estate, the heavenly home. I believe this is just a reference that we are always linked to unity, but that the purpose here is so that we forget unity for a while in order to perfect our use of the personality, so that then we can bring forth the perfect idea on earth, which is when all the divine shards express the divine attribute that they were sent here to express. And the book says, and you remember are the great impersonal I, who am doing all this, who am continually changing in outward appearance, but who within am eternally the same. Ooh, that one, even the wording is rough on this one. It says, and you, let me start this over. It says, and you remember. So that's the I am, because this is supposed to be a conversation directly with God in your heart. It's just written out in this book. So God is saying you, now he puts that capital Y on it because he's talking to the divine shard. You, the divine shard. Remember. So God is referencing something you already know. This isn't new knowledge. We've seen this stated before as well. That the knowledge we need is already within. It's kind of like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. She could have gone home anytime she wanted, back to Kansas. She always had the power. It was within. But she needed the wizard as the trigger from the I am, the voice, the broadcast, because the word comes in many different forms, to say, Dorothy, you, Dorothy's divine shard, remember. And then she was able to access her power, which was the manifestation of love, because love is the power. And hi, Annie, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And he is saying God is there for all mankind if they wish to reach out for him. God is within us all, but we have to search to find him. That's exactly what Joseph Benner is saying. But Joseph's also trying to give you the instructions for the search. Now, I'm taking what Joseph said and saying that it's like a radio broadcast. The I am is the great DJ, and he's pushing out a radio broadcast, and it's 24 hours a day, 356 days a year. It never stops. It's always there. What distinguishes whether we can receive it? Well, we are receiving it. We always receive it. What distinguishes whether we can hear it is whether we turn the volume up, or whether we tune to the right frequency, or whether we are putting our radio next to other radios which are interfering with the broadcast, or if we purposely use a jamming device to stop the broadcast. Those are all forms of interference, or the fog that Joseph Bitter has described. Now, Joseph lived or wrote this book just as radio began to appear. So this kind of metaphor wouldn't have occurred to Joseph at the time. But you could say that it's another reflection of the image of the I Am. That our technology, as it progresses, is also made in the image of God. Because everything is made in the image of God. And that's another thing that Joseph's trying to point out. That's how the word reaches us in so many different forms. Because it's everywhere. And he says Elvis used his knowledge from reading as receptor of all things present and past in this realm or higher. I would agree with that Elvis was searching for resonance, and then he was systematically tying that resonance together. This is a very high-level project that Elvis had. He was creating his own internal metaphysical canon, a way to view his childhood religion in a way that accepted that religion, yet brought other people into a circle of salvation. Now, some people would say that's wrong. I think Elvis was looking at it through a lens of compassion. And he felt like whatever he did through this lens of compassion couldn't be wrong. Now, I'm not sure that that's the right idea either, because I think of emotions like compassion. I think that alignment's like a compass. And the compass points north, and that is alignment. But you don't use a compass to walk north. You use a compass to find your way to wherever you're going. So sometimes you got to walk northeast. Sometimes you got to walk east. Sometimes you have to walk south. Now, to walk directly south all the time, to just lock yourself into that, that is willful misalignment. But anytime we're outside the sheepfold, we're not headed directly north anymore. Because we're in the world. We're in one of these degrees of misalignment. I think of all degrees of misalignment as a state of sin. And we've talked about that a little bit yesterday, and I have some more thoughts about that, but I'm not going to go into them at this moment. I'm just describing the compass. So if we can stay focused above east or west, at least we're still heading north in some capacity. Although the more I think about it, the more I think Jesus might have been telling the 70 disciples that he sent forth to talk to others. You might have to walk south to find some of these people because they have walked into a deep solitude. They're not on the straight and narrow path. They are away from it. Use the compass to come back, to bring them back with you, if possible. At least light their lantern of faith so they can find their way if they want to. Now, on this compass, there's a bezel, and that's a piece that spins around the compass. It doesn't actually have anything to do with the compass per se, because we set where the bezel is. On that bezel is all of our emotions, minus love. Love is another state of being. The needle that is the compass, the magnetized needle that points north. It floats in a fluid, a solution. Sometimes water, sometimes something else. Whatever that is, that's love. Because the needle never leaves the love. It doesn't point to love because anywhere it points is love. Although if we want to get back to unity, which is the greatest concentration of love, that's straight north. But the bezel is all the other emotions, and we can spin that bezel and we can line it up with whichever way we're going. So if we're headed south, we can take affection and we can spin it around south. And that's what Joseph Benner's talking about when he talks about taking the divine power that we're given, which is the Holy Spirit, or inspiration, or divine desire, and we lens it through something that twists it so that we can head whatever direction we want on this compass. That the emotions, like the personality, are a tool, and we're going to use them in whichever direction we're moving. But here, Joseph Benner is saying that the impersonal I in you, the divine shard, it continually is changing an outward appearance. That's why we all look different. All of us are shards, but we all have a different appearance. But who we are within is eternally the same. We're all part of unity. So in some ways, all the divine shards are the same. Yet they can't be because we're all expressing different things. So that's another paradox. There's a lot of paradoxes within religion and Joseph Benner, within metaphysics. But it's because of the spiraling way that they're writing. Because there are multiple layers and ways to look at the word. And he says that the self-realization center made Elvis feel centered and more able to focus on intentions and more. I think that did have some effect on Elvis. I don't think that's the only place that he felt that, but he did feel something very special about the self-realization center. So someday we are going to have to bring that in and do some stories about it. But right now, let's take a step away from this very dense text and let's look at a different way to spiral. And that's in this painting. Now, this is not a Picasso, although this is a Cubist painting. This is another famous Cubist painting. This is Jorge, I'm not sure I can pronounce this right, but Jorge Brock. I'm going to put his name into the chat. It looks like George's Brock to me, but. And I even looked up how to pronounce this right before I came here, but it doesn't stick with me. But this is a painting from 1912, and it's called Man with a Guitar. And so I thought this would be appropriate for Elvis because it's a man with a guitar. However, when I look at this, I do not see a man with a guitar. Do you see a man with a guitar? Let me know in the chat and the comments. I am very interested how many of you see a man or a guitar or a man with a guitar. Now, this is supposed to be seeing that man from every perspective possible. But to me, there are so many perspectives being shown, we can't see the man or the guitar. Which is a lesson about spirals in and of itself. You got to take them slow. Because each of the stops on the spiral, each perspective, well, they do mean something. And then we've got to fit them all together in our head somehow. And that's what this painting is representing. Somehow this represents the way we fit all that together. Although to me, this still seems very confused. Now, over on the left-hand side, I could see something that might represent an arm, but it appears to have a man's face looking left, so it would be the left profile, I guess. I see some other shapes I might say were something, but overall, if I step back, I see a sailing ship. And I know there is no sailing ship here, but that's what I see. But that kind of tells me that a man playing a guitar, well, he's taking people on a voyage. At least when I look at the picture, but I don't think anybody else sees that. And Lorna says she does not see either a man or a guitar. Elizabeth says she's trying to see it, but it's hard. And Annie says it's definitely personal interpretation on this one. Now, this man did this in 1912, long before computers or anybody else was even modeling this for him. And even though this is not my particular taste, and I don't really, probably wouldn't care for this in my own home, I do like the colors, even though they're very muted. They're all kinds of different shades of browns and grays and blacks. But I do like the way that the colors fit together and the shapes themselves that he's put together to form this. I mean, they really do. They do something. I'm not sure what it is, but they're very interesting together. It's something like you would see put together by a computer today, but this was long before anyone thought in these kind of visual terms. And in 1912, long before Elvis was born, in 1935. But even back then, a man with a guitar, it meant something. It meant something to this particular painter. Now let's look at this notation, this annotation that Elvis wrote into the cover. The inside, looks like the inside front cover of the Impersonal Life. Or no, I'm sorry, this is The Prophet. This is a copy of The Prophet that Elvis gifted to Ed Parker, the man who taught him Kenpo karate. Now, Ed was an author himself, and Elvis did really like his book. And we did look at what Elvis wrote in Ed's book, if you're interested in it. It's not within this series, but it is within the karate series that we did right before this one, where you get to meet Ed a lot more intimately than we will here. Now, this is the blank inside cover. So all we have is what Elvis has written. And it says, "Silent law, time will not end until every human wish has been fulfilled." Previously, a practical guide to your head. Now, I've seen Elvis write this in other books. This is another one of his common annotations, I would say. Something that he had formulated out of other books and passages that he'd read. And he's kind of pushed them together, I believe. I don't actually know where these references come from. They don't appear to have come from anything we've seen in the Impersonal Life yet. And I don't see that they're in The Prophet from the pages that we've seen. We've barely skimmed the surface of The Prophet, though. And to be fair, we're only halfway through the Impersonal Life. They don't appear to be in the book of John, but the Bible is very thick, and we just picked out a single book to go through. So I wouldn't expect us to run into lots of Elvis quotes in any particular book. Maybe Psalms. But Psalms is super thick in and of itself. These don't appear to be quotations from Psalms to me. But he says silent law. And he says that this silent law was previously. Now, he's misspelled previously as Parevololly. Parevololly. I'm not sure what's going on with that. I don't know if he's written that too quickly. It doesn't look like it. In the statement above, it does look like he wrote too quickly and he forgot to put some words in. And it's smashed together and it's not all on lines. It feels like it was sitting on his knee when he signed this, because he only uses the right hand portion of the blank area as if that's all that had stability or all he could reach in that moment. So I feel like he was rushed when he wrote this, and I don't know if he just misspelled previously or if that's some kind of inside thing between him and Ed, or if it's a different kind of reference. And then it says a practical guide to your head. So the silent law was previously a practical guide to your head, which sounds like he's quoting that from somewhere. Or that he took something from somewhere and jokingly renamed it Practical Guide to Your Head, and then has renamed it again to Silent Law. I'm not sure. I can't really make it out. I've seen this many, many times, and I just don't know. And now the silent law is that time will not end until every human wish has been fulfilled. I believe that what this means is that every human wish is to receive and transmit love. That it's to be loved and to love others. That it's to be loved, but once you receive that love, then it will immediately be to love others. And that is really a statement of unity, because God equals love equals unity. And so that time will end when everyone is reunited in unity. All divine shards are together. And time's going to end at that moment, because we will all be experiencing the divine now, which is all places, spaces, time, presence, all wrapped into a single point. Not something we can truly understand, but it's the way that God experiences time. Which is to say, he doesn't. Time is something we have made up. It's something that we feel that we experience. It's something that happens because we are creatures of sequence. We require that sequence in order to be able to interpret the universe, and therefore to express the divine attribute that we need to express. But it's similar to math. There's no such thing as a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or a 5. There are no such things as numbers. Those are models that we have created in order to understand how the universe works. Other creatures don't see the universe through that lens at all. To most creatures, there is either a single something or many somethings, if they can distinguish even that far. But we could go so far as to say, oh, this is a one thing and this is two things. Like we have 4 apples, or I have 10 apples. And then I can do things with those 10 apples, like split them up into 5 apples and 5 apples, or 2 apples and 8 apples. And we feel very proud of that. Look, that's your intellect. It jumps up and says, look what we just did. We created something. And we did. But it's an idea and it's not a reality. That's what time is. Something that we measure, but that God doesn't feel. He experiences everything all the time exactly the same. He's in all times and places and spaces. So this is more about a perception that Elvis is noting, that we see time now. When we are in unity, there will be no time. And all human wishes will have been fulfilled because our wish is to go back to unity. And this is just a cheat sheet that I have that I've put together of verbal equations from some of these things we've been looking at, but particularly from the impersonal life, that I think are expressing both the impersonal life and the worldview or metaphysical view that Elvis is incorporating into his own beliefs. Now, I can't say that this represents all of Elvis's internal beliefs. I think this is a layer that he's using. And I'm not sure how far he went with this because we haven't read all the books Elvis read. We haven't even made it through this one. And it was the first one he read, and he read hundreds. So Elvis is far beyond us in this understanding. But at some point, he walked through these equations, even though he didn't write it out this way or think of it in these terms. And I think if I could hand these equations to Elvis, like, he would be just ecstatic about this, and he'd want to start asking questions. And he'd want to have a dialogue, because that's what he thought spirituality was to dialogue with others, with other divine shards, like his Aunt Nash. Now, his Aunt Nash would probably have been opposed to everything I've written here. And for her, it was probably right to be completely opposed to all of this, because she saw it through only the lens of the Bible, in the way that she'd been raised in that. And Elvis respected that. That's why he never tried to convert anyone into any of these kind of thoughts. He just presented them. Nash didn't need these thoughts because she kept her interference with the I am clear, and she was talking directly to the I am. And she had her path. So she didn't need this. This is for others who are searching, because they don't know if they're on the right path. And that's who Elvis keeps trying to talk to. That's who he sings the songs for. And Elizabeth says that she does agree that he'd want to have a dialogue about this, and he'd be excited about it. Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate it. And Eddie says that right now, they'd say that the Elvis world needs to come together in unison, and that division is just heartbreaking, and that nothing has to be this way. I absolutely agree with that. But I think it's like the phone call that we're going through with Red and Elvis. Somebody has to be Elvis, and Elvis is the one that didn't attack. He's the one that just kept stretching out his hand on the phone call, at least as far as we've made it in so far. And I think it's going to be that way all the way to the end. He continues to stretch out. The making the phone call at all was Elvis offering grace. It's Red who is trapped within his own perspective, and who cannot leave that perspective. He has emotionally invested his personality into the perspective. He's got so much interference in those moments with seeing reality. And I can't make any statements about somebody's connection to the I am, especially when it would be negative. It's one thing to say that we can see in Nash that she reflected the I am. It's another to say that you can't see the I am reflected in somebody. That's kind of a bad thing to say. I don't want to say that about anybody. But Red certainly wasn't acting in a way that would bring about reconciliation. He was allowing all of his own issues to overshadow anything Elvis was trying to say to him. And Annie says that Elvis was the bigger person. That's right. And so the question in the Elvis world today is, who is and is going to be the bigger person? Now, I definitely believe that there's an entire set of people trying to antagonize another set. And that is something echoing willful misalignment. Again, I'm not going to say anybody's willfully misaligned or that they are misaligned or they're doing misalignment, but I don't mind talking about echoes because that's the way that it resonates with me. But maybe it's not that way at all. We're going to have to see how everything plays out. And he says that Red wanted a pity party. I think whenever anyone cries out in these ways, that's what they want. And that's a perceptive way to look at it. I'm not sure that a pity party is going to fix anything for anyone, though. I think it feeds a need and a cycle to need it again. But now we're drifting off track and we are out of time. So that's where we're going to have to leave it for today. And when we come back, we'll hear more thoughts from Joseph Benner. And the point's really about not blaming anyone else or looking anywhere else, but thinking about what path our faith illuminates for ourselves. And others aren't going to walk that path, and we can be, as Annie's saying, very disappointed about it. But at the same time, all we can do is continue to walk the path and illuminate as much as we can. And that's what I'll be doing again tomorrow, 10 a.m. Be doing it again at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today. We'll be looking at Red again. And until then, I'm going to leave you with a song. This is Telegram from a Friend.
The lights came down on Vegas gold. July heat, a crown retold. Applause like thunder, stars align. But one true friend was not in line. A telegram, a quiet grace. From 12 years deep, a loyal face. I read your words, they calmed the flame. In all that noise, I spoke your name. I wish you could have been here, Gary. The velvet night, the roaring crowd. But in my heart, your voice was steady. A whisper soft, the faith unbowed. 4 more weeks, this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the haze to Graceland's porch where silence sings and friendship wears no stage or wings. The suits, the gifts, the famous hands, they cheered the king, they made demands. But in the mirror doubt would stare, and only you knew what was there. I wrote you lines in trembling ink, not for the press, not for the drink, just for the man who saw me hold beyond the glitter, past the road. Say hello to everyone, I'll be home when this is done. The curtain falls, the echo fades, but you remain my serenade. 4 more weeks, this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the hay to Graceland's porch where silence sings. Friendship wears no stage or wing.